So Chernobyl's pretty fucking good.
It's absolutely amazing, my dude.
Yep. That's it. Video over. Get fucked.
Goodbye.
Yeah, watch E3.
Watch Devolver.
Watch Devolver's E3, that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay, in all seriousness, Chernobyl is the newest HBO miniseries that they've decided to put out along the lines of something like a Band of Brothers or The Pacific, where it's an in-depth look at a historical event, just kind of a no bullshit, this is what happened sort of feel. And personally, I think it's one of the best shows HBO's ever made, period.
Oh yeah, it's probably my favorite that they've made.
Yeah. And that's definitely a high bar because they have stuff like Game of Thrones, Deadwood, Rome, Band of Brothers, obviously. But to me, Chernobyl manages to excel at the very specific feeling of just being a really long, excellent movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where a lot of great shows manage to do that, where they manage to make you just completely sucked in and feel as though you're just watching a movie that just lasts 12 hours long. If you ever see Mindhunters on Netflix, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But the basic rundown of this show is just as the name describes, Chernobyl. It's talking about the Chernobyl disaster of 1986, where the Pripyat nuclear power plant fucking exploded and contaminated something to the close number of like 2,300 odd kilometers. So obviously, since it's Eastern European and a disaster, it's not very happy at all.
No, not even a little bit. Even the ending, the closest glimmer of happiness you get is, hey, the bad shit isn't gonna get any worse.
Yeah, that's literally how it ends. It's the bad shit's kind of okay now.
Yeah.
And what I like about the show is just the absolute no bullshitness of it. It just talks about Chernobyl and talks about what happens. And really, there are some scenes that, in the right context, could be played as like a fucking horror movie.
Absolutely. Like, everyone that you see that gets, like, advanced radiation poisoning or beyond advanced radiation poisoning, it can 100% just be like a body horror movie all on its own. And that's honestly what I thought it was going to be after I watched the first episode. But I'm glad it took the turn it did, because it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, there are some images that the minute you see it, you're not going to really forget about it for a while, just because it really delves into just how radiation destroys your body and just what it did to the people in Chernobyl. Because one of the most fucked up stories about Chernobyl, and this is something the show actually covers, is a little bit of ways from the plant, there is a bridge kind of over a highway that a lot of people stood on to watch the power plant burn, just because it was the 80s, it was Eastern Europe, they were bored as fuck, so they wanted to watch a fire.
They wanted to watch the pretty lights dance around.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, that specific bridge ended up getting covered in a bunch of ashes from the fire. And what these people didn't know was it was essentially highly irradiated ash, and every single person on that bridge died.
It was shards of or tiny pieces of graphite, I believe, that held shit tons of radiation in them.
It was something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And it just fucked every single one of them up.
Yeah, to the point where the bridge nowadays is literally called the Bridge of Death. Because every single person that stood there, man, woman, child, baby, for fuck's sake, died of radiation poisoning.
Radiation doesn't care about you, it just wants to fuck you up.
Yeah. And really, that's the tone you have to walk into with this show. It is extremely unforgiving, it's extremely brutal. Just no bullshit. It's not going to try to cover stuff up and make it seem Hollywood, because that goes against the entire point of the show, which is that the Soviet Union tried their best to cover this up, and essentially their lies in the first place caused the disaster. I'm not going to spoil how, because that involves a lot of details with the show, but you notice there is a very clear, almost anti-Soviet message to it.
Definitely. And with how hard it drills home, like, everything that they did was just absolutely wrong from beginning to pretty much the end.
Yeah, and the only people that were actually trying to get shit done were basically the three protagonists of the story. Bakarev, who is like the Minister of Energy and something, I forget his exact title, but essentially he was the guy you put in charge of any issues regarding your energy. He was the top government guy. You had Valery Legazov, who was a chief scientist at the Atomic Institute in, I want to say, Moscow. He was a well-respected scientist who knew his shit about atomic energy. and you had Kalmyuk. Kalmyuk is basically a scientist from a college miles down the road from Chernobyl. I want to say it was like 400 some odd miles away from Chernobyl. That still found radioactive graphite right outside of her window. Just the absolute scale of this disaster is insane when you really look at it. And all three characters, really, to put it as bluntly as possible, had to tard wrangle the Soviet government to get anything done.
And it's not like they had to tard wrangle like one specific person or just the head of the Soviet Union or anything like that. They had to tard wrangle every single person that was in a position higher than them just to get what needed to be done.
Because there seemed to have been an absolute refusal by the Soviet government to actually understand how dangerous this was. Even though they specifically got at least two of these characters involved because they are experts in atomic energy, in nuclear energy, they did not listen to them.
They tried their hardest to absolutely not listen to them.
Yeah. Even though they specifically got these experts to teach them what and how all this shit works and how it happened, they didn't listen. Because as stated, that's kind of a running theme with the show. It's just the fact that this government was fucking stupid. Now, there are a lot of moments that are probably so dark they'll turn you off completely. The scene with the dogs is a pretty fucking massive one.
Yeah, the hunting scene, as I've decided to call it, is incredibly dark, but it's still something that they had to do, and I'm glad that they didn't like just gloss over it as like, oh yeah, it was a thing that happened. It was, they had to do this for the ecosystem, because if they didn't, everything would have gotten fucked outside of their zone.
Exactly, because one thing you do learn about with this show is radiation almost acted like a virus, where it would contaminate something, that thing would move on, and it would contaminate everything else around it. To the point that the patients that were in the Pripyat hospital, they screamed at people to not touch them, because that would contaminate you. That actually revolves around another character in the show, a woman who is the wife of a Chernobyl firefighter.
One of the very first responders.
Yeah, one of the very first responders that walked straight into that reactor as it was still burning. And they scream at this woman so many times, do not touch him, he's dangerous, he's irradiated. She never listens, and she had to learn the lesson the hard way.
Oh yeah, and it's a hard lesson that she learns too. A tragic one.
Yeah, we're not going to spoil what, but it's fucked.
Yeah.
And that's just the whole tone of the show. It's, this fucking happened, you can't sugarcoat it. And that's something I really do respect. I really do respect when an artist is so willing to just take a subject that, for all intents and purposes, under any other person, would be watered down, would be censored, would be cut because it would be too scared of really exploring what would happen, and just saying, fuck it. You know, it is what it is.
Yeah. My favorite particular scene from the show, personally, was it was one that I was actually really excited for, as horrible as that sounds. It's a scene where they have to clear out the radioactive rubble from the site, because obviously if you don't, it's just gonna sit there and you can't get the work you need to get done to actually close it off. It's a scene where they tell everybody, you know, here's the amount of time you can spend in this area, and it's only 90 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't actually touch how many people were involved in this, because it's not like you take shift turns, you know, 90 seconds here, then you send group 2, and then you send group 1 again, or anything like that. No, it's, you spend 90 seconds out there in the best radioactive protective gear that we can get you, and then you're done for life.
It's literally the maximum amount of radiation you can ever have in your entire life without dying.
Yeah, you're still going to be fucked up from it, but it was, you know, they were taking people and doing this because it's something that had to be done, whether it was right or wrong, it had to be done.
Yeah, because the radiation, the scene he's talking about, they had to clear the rooftops on the top of Chernobyl, which at the time when the disaster happened and all the radioactive graphite landed on the rooftops of Chernobyl, became so irradiated and contaminated that, no joke, any machine they sent up there to clean the rubble out would fry in less than a minute. Just completely short out and die. They had to send people up there because there was no other option. And there really is just this constant sense of, you get the feeling by the end of the show that millions of people had to have died from this disaster in one way or another, whether it be the generations that caught cancer because of the contamination, or the like 500,000 people that alone were sent to clean it up. Like, you get this like terrifying version and representation of just radiation, which, you know, not something you're used to seeing if you play Fallout or anything like that, where it's like, oh yeah, you pop some rat away and you're fine. No, it would rot your fucking dick off.
Yeah, you don't get out of real radiation nearly that easily. And also, it's just like the way that even the good, quote unquote, good characters like Valeri, like the way they treat people in situations like that, where you can almost feel them needing to detach themselves from it. You know, he calls them biorobots.
Yeah.
Which is literally, they're just people. But, you know, calling them biorobots helps, you know, soften the blow of you're going to take, you know, some 18-year-old kid who's spry and is able to do this work that needs to be done, and you're going to essentially ruin his fucking life.
Yeah. Or just outright kill him if he's unlucky.
Yeah. Over 90 seconds of work. But it's to save much more than just, like, Russia, because assuming it sunk into the groundwater and everything, it would have hurt a lot more than Russia.
Oh yeah, it would have spread to God knows where. And that's something that I love about this show. As stated, it's a complete no bullshit. So it just comes out and says that Chernobyl pushed the world inches away from a complete and total, I guess the word for it would be man-made natural disaster. To a point that it would have affected the entire fucking planet.
Yeah, and like in a Marvel movie, you have a MacGuffin like the Cosmic Cube or something like that. That it's like, oh no, it's this huge like reality bending type thing that could possibly end the world. But in reality, something as small and man-made like radiation like that, it could have ended the entire fucking world.
It could have at least killed half of Europe.
Yeah,
and it's really, really good at just showing how close everything was to the fucking brink. One plot point that gets put up in the show very early on was the issue with the hydrogen tanks, the tanks full of water.
Yeah. And
they had 2 days to fix that hydrogen issue, where all these tanks were full of water, and the melted sand and all that they had to pour on top of the reactor fire was going to touch that water. So you had molten sand, something extremely hot, touching water, which is cool at the most. All that steam being built up in one area that's compact because of everything on top of it, it would have literally caused a thermonuclear explosion.
Yeah, you would have essentially had a second Chernobyl happening like 48 hours, or probably less than 48 hours, honestly, after it. And I don't think Europe could have taken that.
No, definitely not. And just the way everything's shot, just from like a filmmaking standpoint with the show, it's really, really rich and good. They get the look of the area exact.
Yeah, it looks like what I would imagine, you know, Pripyat, you know, Chernobyl, Russia looks like. To be fair, I've never personally visited, but it's honestly spot on with what I would imagine it looks like.
Yeah.
It really absorbs you into it.
Yeah. And just the way that the city, even when it was alive, when it had people in it, felt so haunting and empty. It really gave you this vibe that you're just watching these ghosts walk around when the city's just fucking dead.
Yeah. Once the city's completely and totally cleared, you really do get a feeling of like no one can ever come back here.
Yeah, it feels like you stepped on another planet.
Yeah. An entire city of people just completely and totally disappeared with like a snap of the fingers, you know. Food unfinished, you know, like chairs unturned, you know.
Dogs waiting for their owners, yeah.
Too bad the owners never came back.
And the dogs got fucking shot.
Poor doggos.
Yeah. So it is a really, really good show. We highly recommend it. It's 5 episodes, so that's 5 hours of your life. You're definitely not going to regret losing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spoilery stuff that we didn't really get into. We talked a lot of the big events with Chernobyl, but I feel like those are details that are kind of already obvious just based on things that happened.
Yeah, they're things that like I read up on in like middle school. So I mean, I'm pretty sure people know about them.
Yeah.
God, I hope people know about them.
Yeah, we don't need to get screamed at for spoiling stuff. But it's an excellent show. A lot of just no bullshit history to it, and just the way everything's performed and the absolute dread that you feel throughout the entire show really makes me feel as though they had at least one Eastern European guy on there, putting in that classic Slavic depression that's in all their fucking stories.
Someone who feels like someone personally experienced everything that happened and is just relaying a tale to you.
Yeah.
And you're just horrified the entire time. You want them to stop telling it, but like you don't want to tell them to stop.
Yeah. It's like a Russian fairy tale, motherfucker.
Just let me go to bed, babushka.
Alright, guys. See you next time.
See ya.